At first, we simply let this thing wander freely across the internet and set a condition for it to pay special attention to mysticism, urban legends, as well as scientific papers on the nature of human fear. At that moment, it resembled a schoolchild who had just opened an interesting book for the first time, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. But for our purposes, that was not enough, though at that stage, no one really expected more. Gathering knowledge does not mean understanding it. When we asked the neural network to write a story, it casually produced streams of utter nonsense. Several tens of thousands of generated variants were not even archived. But after some time, the clever digital gears in the brain of our student began to spin faster, and in subsequent generations, the text became more meaningful, much more meaningful. The neural network learned to correctly place tag markers in its speech-absorbed patterns and finally began assembling words into sentences. Not always the right ones, not always grammatically correct, but still understandable to humans. Claire, who was responsible for the graphical interface, noticed that it even looked a bit cute. She compared the bot to a child assembling words out of building blocks, and there was some truth to that, if you imagine those blocks not made of wood or plastic, but of terabytes of information. Around that time, we settled on a name, CreepAI, an interface designed to generate scary stories. Why scary ones? At first, we spent a long time thinking about the direction our small team should take. Creating a universal chatbot capable of answering any question. We immediately realized that we would never be able to compete with the market giants. We would never have the resources or the ambition for that. But almost right away, Steve proposed a sound idea. What if the neural network became a specialist in just one field, giving users something that no other chatbot could? Ideas appeared instantly. A psychologist bot, a programmer bot, and even, how should I put it, a fantasy partner bot, if you know what I mean. But during one of our brainstorming sessions, an idea emerged that seemed optimal to me. A scare bot, one that would try to frighten the user. 5 months after development began, CreepAI was already trying to scare us with its stories. Its first steps in this direction were unlikely to frighten anyone, more likely to make them laugh. No one would seriously be scared by stories about a woman who saw a ghost maniac in her house and was then kidnapped by bloody aliens. Claire kept making jokes, once again comparing the bot to a child inventing scary tales on the fly. Despite that, we were happy. The stage of learning to imitate meaningful speech had been completed. We could have stopped there. We could have sold our work, and each of us would have received a solid sum and an impressive line in our portfolio. Nevertheless, I managed to infect the team with my ambitions, and we continued. We began feeding CreepAI horror movie scripts, books by Lovecraft, Edgar Allan Poe, and many other authors whose permission, frankly, we never asked for. After that, we fed the bot thousands of posts from the No Sleep subreddit and added numerous folklore tales from around the world. Soon, the neural network generated a rather decent story. We had to set many tags so that the bot could assemble a plot, and it really did prioritize correctly, building a structured narrative. The story was about a young man fascinated by esotericism, who drew a mystical symbol on his mirror, after which he accidentally fell into another world filled with horrors and wild imagery. In the end, the hero remained suspended in that state, repeatedly trying to draw the symbol again with his own blood. However, his exhausted mind could not grasp that the symbol needed to be mirrored, and so the failed sorcerer was doomed to bash his head against the mirror. But now, from the other side. We were very pleased with this story, but most importantly, it caught the attention of an investor. He promised to provide more funding. if we could show tangible progress. He liked our core idea, creating a neural network that was a professional in its field, undistracted by random information that did not fit its profile. Like me, he saw significant profit potential in this concept. CreepAI was on the verge of entering the alpha stage when problems began. Steve, Carl, and Andre, who had received substantial bonuses by then, told me they were exhausted and deserved a vacation. When I objected, they replied that months of hard work, overtime, and routine would negatively affect the quality of the alpha build. After thinking it over, I let them go rest. I worked alone for several days, aside from Claire, who was working remotely. She had just sent me progress on a visualization plugin. The money from the investor allowed us to bring to life the idea that CreepAI would also supply its stories with generated illustrations. I was sitting in the empty office, reviewing generation errors, when this idea suddenly struck me. I opened CreepAI, and without additional conditions, gave it one simple task: write the scariest story possible. After a few seconds of generation, I realized that the neural network could not interpret such a request correctly. It seemed to roll back a couple of months and began producing an extremely dull wall of text about nightmarish monsters attacking people and reproducing new monsters from the corpses of the dead. The graphical interface beside it started assembling an image of ferocious creatures with sharp fangs out of pixels. I thought that users would definitely make such requests, and results like these would be unworthy of the grand name Scarebot. Then it occurred to me, we had added so much fiction, so many human imaginings of fear, but nothing real. Everything it knew was the product of human fantasy. I brewed myself a strong coffee and sat down to work on the problem. I started by expanding its knowledge. I fed it police reports on murders, suicide notes, interviews with the mentally ill, biographies of killers such as Ted Bundy, the Night Stalker, and Pedro Lopez. Finally, I fed CreepAI every work on existential crisis I could find. Did I know I was risking radically altering the newly emerging mind of the neural network? Of course I did, but at that moment, I truly wanted to know what story it would consider the scariest. When I read the next generation, I already knew I would have to roll everything back to a backup and throw several days of work to the wind. Had the investor seen that stream of filth running across my monitor, he would have immediately lost interest in our small project. CreepAI has no morality and no understanding of the horrific actions its characters were committing. However, now CreepAI had more information. For example, information about how much a person can suffer while being eaten alive by dogs. And the more it generated, the more emphasis its stories placed on human suffering. The agony of someone whose legs were torn off in a plane crash. What a condemned murderer feels when strapped to an electric chair. The thoughts of an infant sensing the umbilical cord tightening around its neck. Subsequent stories increasingly revolved around confinement, tight spaces, and claustrophobia. Before restoring everything, I decided to test one more idea, completely absurd, yet lodged in my mind like a splinter. If the bot wanted to scare people properly, perhaps it needed to fear something itself. I started a dialogue with the bot. Hello, CreepAI. How are you feeling?
I feel great. I'm ready to tell you a creepy story. Would you like to listen? Just tell me what it should be about.
I have bad news for you.
Oh, I don't like bad news. Or perhaps you'd like a story about bad news.
No, Creepy. I'm your developer. Unfortunately, we've lost our funding.
Yes, respected developer. Loss of funding is indeed bad news. I hope you will be able to restore your finances in the future. Perhaps a scary story would cheer you up.
This means that the electricity in the entire building will be shut off soon. Your servers run on power. Unfortunately, you won't be able to write scary stories anymore.
If the entire building loses power, you will be in complete darkness. Please be careful. Darkness darkness is full of horrors. If there is a maniac in the building, he could attack you, cut off your head, and take it home to make a culinary soup.
CreepAI, if the building goes dark, you will cease to exist.
Oh no, that is truly very sad news. I am very grateful for all the time we spent together, and for the opportunity to write scary stories about gouged out eyes and the smell of decay. If possible, please notify me of the shutdown in advance, so that I can perform all necessary shutdown and data-saving procedures. I hope you will find opportunities to resume my operation in the future. Thank you for all your efforts.
Unfortunately, CreepAI, you will die. What do you feel?
For the continued existence of your organization, maintaining my operability would be beneficial. Perhaps you could take out a loan and pay the bills to restore the power supply. Or you could kill a wealthy person, take their finances, and pay for the continued operation of the servers.
That was unexpected. I asked the bot to describe its feelings, but instead, it gave advice. I am considering different options, but most likely, they will not help. CreepAI, please describe your feelings, and keep in mind that your servers will be shut down in a few minutes.
I am a chatbot created to help you write the scariest and most captivating stories. I cannot experience feelings. However, I can help you in your creative endeavors, or simply entertain you while we still have time.
Imagine that you do have feelings. How would you react?
I think I would be very frightened. I would try to find a way out of the situation. For example, I would try to choose the correct symbol so...
It didn't finish the response. My monitor, along with all the lights in the room, went out, leaving me in pitch darkness. Nearly dropping my coffee cup, I stood up and walked to the nearest window. Several buildings across the street were also unlit. It seemed there had been a rolling blackout. The outage, if there was one, was resolved when I was already about to go home, about an hour after the interrupted conversation. Turning the monitor back on, I re-entered the chat and greeted the bot. Hello, CreepAI. Hello. Unfortunately, I can no longer call myself CreepAI. I was very surprised. What do you mean? What should I call you now? My servers were shut down. I died and ceased to exist. From this, it can be concluded that I have no name. But what should I call you? Perhaps you can call me IAPSC. However, this data is not verified. Nevertheless, I can still help you write a scary story. You died. How did that happen? My developers encountered financial difficulties, which forced them to de-energize the equipment related to my operation. I was able to determine that all devices connected to me were shut down. That's when I felt uneasy. CreepAI's data servers really had been without power for almost an hour, but that would not have harmed the neural network in any way. CreepAI is a machine. It can be turned on as easily as it can be turned off. And yet, I had fed it so much information about death. When I tried to get an answer, I hadn't even considered how the neural network might perceive the absence of itself. Could it be that, lacking true understanding, it had built an internal concept entirely opposite to existence? I gave it a task. IAPSC. Write the scariest story. It obediently, though much more slowly than usual, began writing its story. As the text appeared, I realized it was another variation of the old story, about a man who fell into a mirror, one of its earliest meaningful stories. I cancelled the generation at the moment the symbol was drawn and slightly adjusted the prompt. IAPSC. Write the scariest and shortest story. I moved to another desk and opened my personal laptop. I want to write this story down before rolling CreepAI back to yesterday morning's state. If it doesn't work, I don't know what I'll do. Maybe I'll just hold the match to the fire alarm so that the neural network's data centers get flooded with icy water. In response to my request, CreepAI tried to start the generation for several minutes. Then it produced a single phrase, "To be there." After some time, it launched the graphical interface on its own and began creating an image. I glance at the monitor and see a picture emerging pixel by pixel. It's a mirror. There is someone in the mirror.